with what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%.
100%.
An extraordinary day in Washington. A look at how the Kavanaugh hearing played out for both sides.
He seemed like, he was a nice young guy or whatever.
Okay.
But,
Today in the Van Dyke trial, a defense witness paints an unexpected picture of Laquan McDonald. The son of a prominent white supremacist becomes a leader in his father's movement and later rejects the cause, transforming the merchandise mart into a canvas for digital art.
Your ability to overcome obstacles and your amazing potential inspire me.
Northeastern Illinois University has a new president. We hear from Gloria Gibson about her plans for the Northwest Side campus.
He handed me the camera with essentially my first assignment, which is to document my family's mourning process.
And today, this Pilsen photographer is winning acclaim for pictures of his community as the neighborhood changes around them. All that and more next on Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Phil Ponce. The city's on guard for an upcoming verdict in the Jason Van Dyke trial. Paris Schutz has that story and more of what's making news in Chicago tonight. Paris.
Phil, city public safety officials are making preparations for whatever happens after a verdict comes in the trial of Jason Van Dyke. Today, Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson acknowledged the high emotions in that trial and said police will be on guard should some sort of protest or public demonstration break out after a verdict comes, possibly as soon as next week.
If in the event things go a little bit sideways, we're prepared for that also. I spoke the other day, we can cancel officers' days off, go to 12-hour shifts and put them in strategic locations across the city. But we will be prepared for it. But right now, I'm really not that concerned that we're going to have that type of issue in the city of Chicago. I mean, after all, this is the city that we all call home.
Day one of early voting in Illinois for the November midterm elections. A slow trickle of early voters made their way to the Loop Super site at 175 West Washington Boulevard to cast their ballots. The site will be open between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Sundays, generally all the way up until Sunday, October 21st. Today, one prominent early voter, Democratic gubernatorial candidate J.B. Pritzker, explained why he wanted to get his ballot in so quick.
My purpose in being here today was to make sure that everybody gets out and votes. It's our constitutional right. It's also our duty.
Some relief today for motorists who travel down Lakeshore Drive. The reconstruction project that has choked a lot of lanes is going quicker than anticipated. Today, the Chicago Department of Transportation announced that as of 3 this afternoon, all 4 lanes of the drive between Monroe and LaSalle Drive have been reopened. All construction on Lakeshore Drive is expected to be finished by October 6th in time for the Chicago Marathon. As for the weather, mostly cloudy tonight with a low around 52, and then tomorrow, mostly cloudy as well. A chance of afternoon showers with a high near 60. And don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook via podcast and the PBS video app, as well as online at WTTW.com/news. Now, Phil, back to you.
Thank you, Paris. It was a long day for the Senate Judiciary Committee and an even longer one would have to believe, for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and his accuser Christine Blasey Ford. Sex crimes prosecutor Rachel Mitchell and Democrats on the committee spent hours questioning Ford about her sexual assault allegation against the nominee. Democrats, Mitchell, and then some committee Republicans questioned Kavanaugh. But before that, Ford and Kavanaugh each opened with a statement that elicited strong responses from social media commentators and from the senators themselves.
I am here today not because I want to be. I am terrified. I am here because I believe it is my civic duty to tell you what happened to me while Brett Kavanaugh and I were in high school.
My family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed by vicious and false additional accusations. The 10-day delay has been harmful to me and my family, to the Supreme Court, and to the country.
Joining us to discuss optics and strategy on both sides of the hearing is Alan Turkheimer. He is the founder of Trial Methods. That's a Chicago-based trial consulting firm. And welcome back to Chicago Tonight. First of all, just outline what the process was for people who maybe weren't able to watch the entire hearings today of the two witnesses.
Sure. The senators were going to question Brett Kavanaugh after questioning Dr. Ford, and they started out by, because of the optics involved, they didn't want to question her. These Republican males on the Judiciary Committee, they ceded their time to a special prosecutor. So she asked the questions, Rachel Mitchell her name was, she asked the questions to Dr. Ford, and then after those questions went on and Ford answered, then the Democrats had 5 minutes each to question Dr. Ford. Then when nominee Brett Kavanaugh came on, the same format continued where the special prosecutor asked questions of him, but then after several back and forth, Lindsey Graham thought that she wasn't doing an effective job, and so he decided he wanted to ask his questions because, look, it's a political process, and she was asking questions as a prosecutor. He wanted some political undertones to his questioning, so he started questioning Brett Kavanaugh, and then other Republican senators followed suit, in addition to the Democratic senators.
So it was kind of, it was an interesting tempo because it was kind of choppy. No one was really able to work a narrative, although people would come back to themes. But was there a moment that was most startling or most memorable, or one that you think will stay with viewers?
I believe it was when Patrick Leahy asked Dr. Ford what was the most livid for her about the whole experiences, and what she remembers, she said, uproarious laughter. Now, a lot of what she said resonates, and victims of sexual abuse and assault can embrace what she said during the whole time, but anybody can understand that from the standpoint of a human being, that there was this laughter going on as she's describing a traumatic event that preceded that.
We have a clip of that exchange, and let's listen to it.
What is the strongest memory you have? The strongest memory of the incident, something that you cannot forget. Take whatever time you need.
Indelible in the hippocampus is the laughter, the uproarious laughter between the two, and they're having fun at my expense.
What kind of strategy did you notice on each side? Was it evident?
She was very credible from a personal and professional standpoint. She told her story, but she also interweaved these notions of brain science and psychology behind what she was describing. I think it was cathartic for her, and clearly she didn't want to be there, so she was presenting her version of what happened. She wanted to tell everybody this because Brett Kavanaugh's on the verge of being nominated or being confirmed to the highest court, so she wanted to get her story out.
And from Brett Kavanaugh's standpoint and the side of the Republicans?
So he certainly came out swinging, and he was showing some rightful indignation. He wanted to show that he didn't want to be a lightweight with these charges and allegations. He wanted to show that he was, he came at it from a lawyerly perspective. He went over his themes and wanted to say that he's in a sense a victim too, that he's being dragged through the mud, that it's unfair, that these allegations are so long ago. And he was very careful to walk the line of not attacking her and going after these allegations, and the notion that he could be dragged in and ask these questions about something that took place a long time ago where there was alcohol involved.
As we mentioned, a special prosecutor, or a special questioner rather, was brought in to conduct the questioning for the Republicans regarding Rachel Blasey Ford. Was that a good approach to take on the part of Republicans?
I think it was initially. I think there was just something about the perceptions it would be. Look, it's the Me Too movement in the background, and to have these male senators going after or asking questions to this person who claims that she suffered this traumatic event so long ago, I don't think it would have looked good. And ultimately, look, it's a mini trial made for TV in a way with the testimonies, because you have her testimony was very emotional, very powerful, and his was also emotional too. And I think after her testimony, a lot of people thought, well, this is going to be derailed. He got up there, made his points, he did what he had to do, and really it's going to come down to a handful of senators in some key states. I think Murkowski and Collins, these Republicans, it could go either way.
Political decisions. As a trial consultant, though, are you able to step back and think, one side was more persuasive than the other, or would you call it a draw?
I think it's a draw, which at the end of the day helps the nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, because she did what she had to do. She got her story out, and she was pretty credible and persuasive. He got up there, and he told his story. So I do think it ended up being a draw. And it's really a Rorschach test. No matter who you are, you see what you believe. And Republicans, Kavanaugh supporters, thought he probably came out on top, and people who were against the nominee thought that she won.
Alan Turkheimer, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me.
And now to Eddie Aruza in reaction to today's extraordinary hearing. Eddie.
Phil, it's safe to say that there's never been a hearing involving a U.S. Supreme Court nominee quite like the one today, not even going back 27 years to the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings. Today, both the nominee and his accuser provided powerful and emotional testimony about her accusation of sexual assault. But emotions also ran high among members of the Judiciary Committee.
This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics. And if you really wanted to know the truth, you sure as hell wouldn't have done what you've done to this guy.
You spent 2 years in the White House office that approved judicial nominees. You turned to the FBI over and over and over again for their work. Let's bring them in here and now. Turn to Don McGahn and tell him it's time to get this done. An FBI investigation is the only way to answer some of these questions.
Joining us tonight with their perspectives on what they saw and heard today are Jennifer Nevins, who was a Trump delegate to the 2016 Republican National Convention and describes herself as a Trump supporter and a disaffected Republican, and Marianne Case, a professor of law at the University of Chicago, an expert on feminist jurisprudence, sex discrimination, and the legal regulations of sexuality, marriage, and family. Thank you both very much for being here tonight. Jennifer Nevins, this is the first time that the nation heard and saw Christine Blasey Ford. You yourself, as a supporter of Judge Kavanaugh, what was your reaction to her testimony?
My reaction to her testimony is this is a woman who was telling a very heartfelt story. The problem is that doesn't mean that Brett Kavanaugh is any part of that story. I think that this woman very well may be retelling an actual experience that happened to her, but I think she's being used, and I think she's been exploited by people. We know, for example, her lead attorney is very, very much against Trump and has spoken out against Paula Jones and other women who have come against liberal or Democrat politicians. So I think it's a whole exercise in a lot of dishonesty and disingenuousness, and I think it's really very disturbing.
Marianne Case, what did you see and hear? What was your takeaway?
I saw deja vu all over again on both sides. I was a new law professor at the time of the Anita Hill hearing. I saw a very poised, educated, calm woman talking about something that was obviously very difficult for her. And then I saw on the other side similar reactions from both Clarence Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh, in the sense that they both categorically denied all the charges. And I will say that, Thomas did that. He sits on the Supreme Court. Many of us believed Anita Hill then. I think many more of us believe now that she was telling the truth, and that Clarence Thomas's categorical denies were probably perjurious. I saw also, you mentioned I was a theorist of feminist jurisprudence and of gender. I saw men behaving in ways, the two adjectives that occurred to me are hysterical and Brett Kavanaugh's, and that of all the Republicans, including Kavanaugh, and maudlin. And both of those are adjectives associated with women. Hysterical referring to the wandering womb, maudlin referring to the weeping Mary Magdalene.
So a double standard is what you're calling out here, that if this had been a woman reacting like that, she would have been called out for it, but a man will not be called out for it?
I'm not saying it was a double standard. I'm saying the behavior that I witnessed, the method of presenting before the committee, both by the members of the committee and by Kavanaugh, was that for which women are often condemned.
Jennifer Nevins, the reporting this afternoon is that these two witnesses may not have shifted a lot of minds either in their direction or the other. Right. It's still too early to determine, but what is being said today is that Judge Kavanaugh he rallied the base. He energized the base, among whom you are one. Was that your takeaway?
That's absolutely the truth. And what you were just saying there, Eddie, about how it's not going to change anybody's point of view, that's what shows you what political theater this whole exercise was. None of those people, none of the Democrat senators today who are questioning Brett Kavanaugh and claiming that all they want to do is drill down and get to the truth, to the man and woman, have already come out and said that they have no intention of voting for this man. And this was before Professor Ford came on the scene. So what we have here, it's saying we want an FBI investigation. We want to really get to the truth. It's not the case. It's not true. I don't know who they think they're fooling. When we have somebody like Kristen Gillibrand.
Why not have reopening the FBI background?
Absolutely. Well,
do you favor that? And is that something that the president should have asked for?
The thing with the FBI investigation, and the FBI, we've already been through this before. They have already said, and many retired agents have already said, how can we investigate this? We don't know where it happened. We don't exactly know when it happened. They have the statements from the witnesses. That's what the FBI does. They pursue evidence, and they don't make a conclusion. They present it to whom? To the same group of people. And then what are they going to do? They're going to come to the same conclusions that they're coming now. What the purpose of that FBI investigation is to delay. Oh, we only need a week, they say. And what can happen in a week? 5, 6, 7 more allegations. And so then what happens? We need an FBI investigation into those allegations. It's a never-ending cycle.
Well, more witnesses did come forward, and they said that they were ready to testify to the FBI. And in fact, the FBI did reopen the case when Anita Hill came forward, didn't they, Marianne Case?
As I recall, at the request of the Republicans, who have categorically refused to make this request. That is to say, Kavanaugh has refused, the White House has refused, the Senate Republicans, despite having been asked by the Democratic senators, have refused.
I'm sorry.
I really would like to speak to that, because the idea that the FBI is going to get involved this late in the process, again, Dianne Feinstein could have escalated this process almost 2 months ago. She chose not to. So to say we need an FBI investigation.
At the request of Christine Blasey Ford to keep it confidential.
Okay. The point of the matter is that the FBI could have been involved in this much sooner. And when we had Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill, they both were federal employees. They were both adults and federal employees. There was jurisdiction there for the FBI to get involved. This is not the case here.
That is not why the FBI became involved then. And there is no reason for the FBI not to be involved now. I'm honestly puzzled, looking at it from the perspective Kavanaugh is announcing. If he really claims that his reputation is forever ruined, I don't understand why he doesn't want to clear his name with an investigation with facts. If what he wants to do is get on the court, he's quite right. Using his phrase nominee precedent, the nominee precedent of Clarence Thomas suggests his is a very effective strategy. To claim smear because he can't as a white man claim high-tech lynching, to categorically deny, and to push forward for a vote as quickly as possible.
Jennifer Nevins, give me your reaction to the format that we were talking about just a few minutes ago, and that is that this sex crimes prosecutor, a female, was brought in to question Dr. Ford, but she's suddenly disappeared in the middle of the Republican, when Judge Kavanaugh came in and the Republicans started questioning him again. What did you think of that?
Well, I thought it was a mistake from the outset with the GOP, one of many mistakes that they've made in this procedure that we're seeing. There was no need for them to get a special prosecutor to question her. It resulted in a very choppy hearing. She wasn't able to fully develop the questions that she needed to, and the reason it was done was to placate this Me Too movement, this idea that if we have men, Republican men, questioning this woman, that's bad optics, we can't do that. Never mind the fact that you have Democrat men questioning Dr. Ford, that's okay. So until we can get away from this very flawed notion that women deserve special protections and that they have to be questioned in a certain way, then we're just going to wind up with more of this nonsense.
Marianne Case, how does this extraordinary hearing play into the culture of the Me Too movement?
I regret to say it shows how little rather than how much has changed.
In terms of women being heard for and their accusations being believed?
Everything about the process. I mean, that, and also the question of what we do with men who have to use the mildest of phrases, misbehaved, right? Obviously, Kavanaugh and all of his supporters felt that, as Clarence Thomas apparently also felt, that it was not possible to say, yes, this may be true, and if it's true, I'm sorry. I either, was young and have changed, or now that I understand how hurtful this behavior is, will change. That was something Clarence Thomas could have said, didn't.
Because he says that he wasn't responsible for any of that behavior. And Brett Kavanaugh says the same thing. Why in the world would they fall on their swords when they're saying that they didn't do it? There is a problem, and I was going to mention about Kristen Gillibrand earlier. She made the statement that she believes Professor Ford. This is before she testified. I believe her. And you know why she said that? I believe her because she's telling the truth. And then she went on to say that survivors of sexual assault tell the truth. As long as we're going to believe boilerplate like that, we're not going to advance very far.
Let me put both of you on the Judiciary Committee, if only for a moment. What would you have asked Dr. Ford if you could have?
Boy, that is a really tough question.
Is there something that you would have pointedly asked her about her experience or her memories, or whether she was telling the truth?
I think I would have possibly drilled down on, first you said that there were 4 people in the room with you, and now you're saying that there were 2 people in the room with you. You also have a shifting definition of what if PJ, this man PJ, was a bystander or whether he was actually a participant. If this is the case and you have made these adjustments, is it not possible that you might not be remembering the individual who is possibly responsible for doing this to you?
Mary Ann Case, what question would you have asked, for example, Judge Kavanaugh?
I would have liked to have him answer any of the questions asked. I'm not sure what point there is asking him questions, given that he seems unwilling to answer any of them.
At this point, the outcome of all of this is still uncertain, whether there's going to be some Republicans that decide to vote no against him. What is your prediction at this point? Quickly, Jennifer Nevins.
I think that he is going to get confirmed. It's going to be a nail-biter. I know the usual suspects that we have to wonder how they're going to vote, but I think in the end, Judge Kavanaugh did a lot for himself today, and I think he will prevail.
Mary Ann Case, what is your prediction?
My prediction, unfortunately, at this point is similar. However, what I also predict is that this inquiry will not end. And I, for one, would rather have this inquiry go on with responsible law enforcement rather than the news media.
Rather than in the public, the public domain.
No, not in the public domain. Law enforcement has tools at its disposal that the news media does not.
And the FBI also sent a letter.
We're going to have to leave it there. I'm sorry, Jennifer. Jennifer Nevins and Mary Ann Case, thank you both very much for your thoughts and insights. Back in a moment with more Chicago Tonight, so please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
Still to come on Chicago Tonight, the son of a prominent white supremacist becomes a leader in his father's movement and then rejects the cause. The biggest digital art project in the world soon on view at the Merchandise Mart. Chicago's Northeastern Illinois University gets a new president, its first African-American woman. Meet Gloria Gibson. And a photographer in the Pilsen neighborhood uses his art to bring attention to the residents being squeezed out and those who remain. But first, the second week of testimony in the Jason Van Dyke trial wrapped up today. The defense is presenting the case that Van Dyke's shooting of Laquan McDonald was justified. Chicago Tonight reporter Matt Masterson joins us with the latest from today's proceedings. And Matt, where are we in the case at this point?
So the defense attorneys are going to be continuing to present their case into next week for why they believe that Jason Van Dyke was justified in shooting Laquan McDonald 16 times back in 2014. It's still unclear if Van Dyke himself is going to take the stand and testify, but to this point, through the first 2 weeks, jurors have heard from 40 witnesses from both the prosecution and the defense, and they've watched and rewatched different versions of the infamous dash cam video of the shooting dozens of times thus far.
What has the defense done to try and prove its case for an acquittal?
They've really tried to convince the jury of 2 points. One is that Laquan McDonald was this out-of-control, violent teen, and another is that Jason Van Dyke acted within his training to neutralize the threat that Laquan McDonald posed when he was walking with a knife down South Pulaski. Earlier this week, we heard from an instructor at the Chicago Police Academy who testified about when use of force, deadly use of force, is justified for police officers. And today we heard from another instructor at the Chicago Police Academy. This is a retired instructor. His name is Nicholas Pappas, who instructed officers about firearm usage. And he said that he trained Van Dyke and others that when they're faced with a threat, they should continue shooting until that threat has ended. But prosecution has argued that deadly force should only be used as a last resort, and the decision to stop shooting is just as important as the decision to start.
The defendant wasn't taught to just empty his magazine once he makes the decision to shoot, correct?
He was taught to shoot rapidly. He was taught to neutralize the threat.
Okay. And when you say neutralize the threat, you don't mean neutralize the life, do you?
It means stop the fight. Make sure that the person is incapacitated. Make sure that the person cannot hurt someone.
Matt, what else was learned today?
So in his opening arguments, defense attorney Dan Herbert painted a picture of Laquan McDonald being on this wild rampage in the hours and the day leading up to his death. And part of that included trying, as Herbert said, to steal a woman's car on the west side. So we heard from that woman today. Her name is Yvette Patterson. She testified, but she painted a much different picture than the one that Herbert painted. She said that she had a conversation with McDonald, that he didn't try to steal her car, but rather he asked if he could use it and said he'd bring it right back. Patterson said that McDonald approached her early in the day of the shooting. It was about 2 a.m., but she described a calm conversation where she was laughing with McDonald. And Patterson did decline to offer her car, but she did eventually call police, but she did say that she was also not threatened by McDonald.
I called the police for the simple fact because I wanted to go in the house.
Were you fearful to go into the house with this individual there?
I wasn't in fear at all. I wasn't in fear. It was just the fact that, you know, I wanted to go in and I wanted to be sure that I was going to be okay getting out my car going into the house. He didn't fear me because of the conversation we had. He seemed like, you know, he was a nice young guy or whatever.
So what is left? What is expected to happen next week?
So testimony for this week is done. It's going to resume on Monday in the trial's third week. The defense has more witnesses to call, and prosecutors will also be offered the opportunity to recall some of their own witnesses to rebut defense testimony if they so choose. But from what it seems, that this case could be drawing to a close next week, and jury deliberations, some are predicting, could start later in the week.
Matt, thank you. And you can read more about the Van Dyke trial on our website. There's more Chicago Tonight ahead, but first we're going to take a very short break to ask for your support of this program and tell you how you can get tickets to a very special Chicago Tonight event. Here is Amanda Vinnicky.
Hello, Chicago Tonight viewers. I'm Amanda Vinnicky, and I cover how our state is governed. My job is to tell you who and what is behind the decisions and laws that affect your life. It doesn't get any better than that. Why aren't you part of these meetings? You're the governor.
Well, so I've talked to...
When I joined Chicago Tonight a few years ago, I knew I was joining one of the best teams of journalists around, both on TV and online. We cover stories from all sides, everything from the complex world of Springfield to the more personal stories that connect us all. No other Chicago television station provides that in-depth storytelling, and you won't find this kind of local coverage in other cities. Chicago Tonight is unique. You know that independent, unbiased journalism is more important now than ever before. On Friday, October 19th, join me and my Chicago Tonight colleagues for a fun, behind-the-scenes look at the coming elections. We will explore the campaigns and the candidates in a freewheeling discussion, and you can join in the conversation as well. Here's how.
For a donation of $100, you will receive a ticket to this event at the WTTW studios in Chicago. Please go online now at WTTW.com/news or call 773-588-1111 to sign up. Any amount helps keep Chicago Tonight strong, but if you contribute $100, you will receive a ticket to this unique event. Tickets are limited, so don't miss this opportunity. Again, it's Friday, October 19th at our WTTW studios.
For more than 30 years, Chicago Tonight has connected you to your community. You can trust us to bring you in-depth, unbiased coverage of the story you care about most, and we can only do it with your help.
So please go online now at WTTW.com/news or call 773-588-1111 to reserve a seat at $100 each for our Chicago Tonight behind-the-scenes look at the coming election. You can join in the conversation and meet the whole Chicago Tonight team.
Thank you for your support of Chicago Tonight. We look forward to seeing you here in October.
Next, the story of an outspoken white supremacist renouncing his ideology and confronting the damage he had done. His name is Derek Black, and his story is told in the new book, Rising Out of Hatred, The Awakening of a Former White Nationalist. The author is Washington Post staff writer Eli Saslow, who joins us now. Eli, welcome to Chicago Tonight. First of all, tell us about Derek Black and his early life.
Sure. So Derek grew up at the epicenter of this white nationalist movement. His father was Don Black, who'd started a site called Stormfront.org, which has 300,000 racist users who come to it every day from around the world. It's translated into 5 or 6 languages. And Derek's godfather was David Duke, the most notorious racist politician of our time.
This picture we have right here, tell me who we're looking at.
We're looking at Derek with his father standing right next to him in the center of the photo. And that was when...
Is Derek the young man with the hat?
Derek's the young man with the hat. Yeah, Derek, from the time he was 10 years old, was a public figure from within this movement. He was giving interviews on Nickelodeon about his racist views from the time he was a kid.
Nickelodeon would have someone expressing those beliefs?
Nickelodeon would do specials on kids who hate, or shows like the Jerry Springer Show or the Jenny Jones Show would bring Derek and his father and have shows on how to confront a racist. And Don and Derek would go because they thought it was good publicity for their terrible ideas.
So he had quite the pedigree in terms of a family, and he becomes a white nationalist leader in his own right.
Yeah, and Derek, I think the thing that made him so dangerous is he's really smart. By the time he was 20 years old, he spoke 3 different languages. He had risen to a position of power in this movement. He had a daily radio show. He'd started a radio network. He'd been elected to public office in Florida, where he lived, with a majority of the vote, running with white nationalist ideas. He built a website for white pride kids that reached almost 1 million kids, indoctrinating them with these same ideas. So he did huge amounts of damage by rising to the top of this.
And one of the things you point out in your book is that he was very adept at using language in a way which made white nationalism, white supremacists, a little more palatable. Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, he worked really hard to sort of scrub the rhetoric from its history of violence and bloodshed. So he convinced his father to remove all slurs from the Stormfront website. No more slurs about minorities. And instead, he and his father began trying to reach out to white people by speaking to this really false sense of grievance that unfortunately a rather significant percentage of white people in this country have, based on false ideas, by saying to those people, isn't it too bad that the country's changing in some ways? Wouldn't it be better if there were fewer people speaking different languages? Shouldn't we prioritize European immigration? Shouldn't we build a wall on the border? These were the kind of points Derek was making, and they were the things that got him elected at 20 years old.
And because he ran to be a Republican committeeman?
Exactly. Yep, a Republican committeeman. He won. He won 65% of the vote in a really diverse district. But Derek realized by going and talking to people about these ideas, if he didn't identify himself as a racist, many people shared these same racist ideas, which I think is a part of the problem we're confronted with right now in America.
So let's fast forward. He enrolls in college, and on the down low, he continues his daily broadcast, but eventually he's found out and outed. What happened?
So a student at the school was researching extremists in the United States for a paper he was doing, and he was on the Southern Poverty Law Center website and looked at the pictures of the scariest people in the country, and in those pictures saw the photo of a student who sat next to him in math class. And as you can imagine, the school essentially exploded in a debate of what do we do about this? How do we react to having this huge heir to the racist movement on our campus? How do we go about either pushing him out or trying to impact his thinking and change his mind?
And that's what happened when an Orthodox Jew on campus invited him to Shabbat.
Correct, Shabbat. I mean, it started, I think, with also civil resistance on campus was really effective. There were students who protested Derek's views that made him see, I think, for the first time how awful some of these ideas were and how hurtful they were for his peers. But it also meant that when students reached out to him and began inviting him to these dinners, Derek had no other invitations and he decided to come. So he started spending time with all of these people who were totally unlike him. New immigrants to the country, Jews, all of these people became Derek's friends on campus and gradually started changing some of his ideas.
Why did he accept the invitation if he's so,
because I think he was
expressions
curious.
up to that point were anti-Jewish, anti-immigrant.
Yeah, horrifically anti-Jewish and anti-immigrant. But I think Derek had lived the first part of his life in a very insular world. He hadn't spent much time with people who weren't like him. So I think he was curious about what were these people really like. Were his stereotypes correct, or was there something beyond them that he could learn or figure out?
One of the people at the dinners was a woman named Allison Gornick. She eventually becomes his girlfriend. Tell us about her.
Allison decided she got very curious about Derek because she saw him coming to these dinners and being kind to people around the table, and she couldn't square why this person was saying horrible, racist things on the radio and yet being kind and generous to a diverse group of peers on this campus. So she decided she wanted to figure out what he thought and debate him on it. She went undercover with him at one point to a white nationalist conference in the woods of Tennessee to try to understand his ideas, and then she armored herself with the facts about, the flaws in Derek's ideas about racial IQ differentials, all the false science that a lot of racism is based on, and she sent him studies about all the ways in which he was wrong. The intensity of those conversations first led Derek to begin questioning these ideas, but also fueled an intensity in the relationship that then became very close.
In 2013, he renounces his views, does a 180, and first of all, how did he do it, and what was the reaction to it?
So Derek knew that if he was going to renounce this, it was going to cost him essentially everybody he had met, including his family, everything about the first 22 years of his life. So when he renounced it, that's what happened. Pretty much everybody stopped speaking to him. There were threats about him on this message board, people looking for him. He changed his name, he moved across the country, and I think he thought for a while that he would try to disappear. But Derek began to see all of these seeds that he'd planted, all of this racism rising around him in all of these ways. And I think he knew that the damage he'd done was real, and he felt culpable, and he needed to speak up against it. And so Derek has decided to do that again and again, because I think at this moment in our country, he feels like being silent means being complicit.
And you also write that he feels that he contributed a lot to the acceptance of white national, or the growth of white nationalism, rather. He initially didn't want to talk to you, but clearly he changed his mind. Currently, he is a student at the University of Chicago?
He is. He's in his final years of his PhD program at the University of Chicago, and he's also become sort of a more prominent anti-racist, rising against this movement to fight back against it. So, sometimes that means writing op-eds for the New York Times. Sometimes it's meant consulting with Facebook and trying to help them figure out how to stop extremism. Sometimes it's meant, volunteering locally, quietly in ways to push back here.
Tell us, give us an update on his relationship with your family, because as you point out, when he renounced his beliefs, there was a big family split.
Yeah, the split remains. I mean, I think that his family experienced Derek's rejection of their views like a death, because Derek wasn't just saying, I don't believe in this anymore. He also was saying to his family, the things you're saying and the things you're doing are evil and cause real damage. So Derek occasionally will text message with his father about his father's health, things like that, but ideology was always at the heart of this family and at these relationships, and I think they've had trouble finding their way back into the same kind of close conversations.
One can't help but look at the pivotal moment in Derek's story having to do with that outreach on the part of students at his college. What is the lesson to take away from
I think the lesson is to invest yourself in trying to create real change, which is what students on this campus did. And they did that. Some did it through protesting, but these other students decided that they were going to invite Derek over, not just once to talk to him about his views, but again and again and again. Even when they were sometimes the victims of his prejudices, they kept inviting him back. And transitions like this don't happen quickly. It took 2 years of sustained effort, sustained courage on their part, of beginning to slowly thaw away at some of his beliefs.
Eli Saslow, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. It's a fascinating story.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Again, the book is Rising Out of Hatred, The Awakening of a Former White Nationalist. You can read an excerpt on our website. And back with more right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Allstate. Allstate is investing in Chicago's youth. We believe good starts young. That's why we're helping our youth develop the skills they need to achieve success in life. Allstate is proud to empower the next generation of leaders.
It is a spectacle known as Art on the Mart. This weekend, the largest digital art projection in the world will be projected onto the Mart, which is what the Merchandise Mart is now called by its current owner. Chicago Tonight was there for an illuminating preview of a project that transformed the Chicago landmark into a canvas for light. It was the largest building in the world when it opened in 1930. Soon, its famous facade will be on the receiving end of 34 projectors across the river that will transform it nightly into the latest addition to Chicago public art.
We see it as even more than an addition, but really a transformation of what public art can be, because this is such a radically new and innovative platform. One of the things that distinguishes it is its incredible, incomparable scale. So this is the surface area, the projection area of the Mart is over 2.5 acres. And so to help conceptualize that, that's larger than 2 football fields.
We asked the digital team about the allure and challenge of working on this scale.
It's working with the architecture of the building and finding a location to be able to project from that looks, like it blends into the architecture and also gives you the amount of brightness that you were trying to work with on the building, and also, work with all of the texture and bring together everything into one, cohesive piece.
The digital show for the media did not include the 4 artists, 2 from Chicago, whose work is soon to be projected. The art project is expected to be permanent and has a 30-year agreement with the city.
It will be on view every Wednesday through Sunday, so 5 nights a week, 2 hours each evening. The works will, after the launch, run on a kind of loop. And again, 10 months a year, March through December.
Art on the Mart is compliant with the Audubon Society and should not affect migratory birds. Also, it won't be a billboard.
We're not thinking about this in terms of sponsorships or branding. In fact, that's raked right into our agreement and commitment with the city. This is an incredible philanthropic gift on the part of the Mart and its parent company, Vornado Realty Trust. So truly a gift of public art to the city.
One of the things I think is important to look at when you're looking at building projections is extending a canvas to the city. It's a new piece of art that we can bring to the city of Chicago, as it's known for its art. This is bringing in a digital art piece to be able to showcase multiple types of artists, be able to showcase Chicago as an art center, and have a digital canvas that can change every night.
Chicago has this very long trajectory of public art, and we're delighted to bring this new milestone.
Art on the Mart launches this Saturday, and if you're thinking of driving there, bear in mind that Wacker Drive will be open to pedestrians but shut down to traffic during the spectacle. There's more information on our website, and we are right back after this.
Coverage of the arts on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Russell and Josephine Cott Memorial Charitable Trust, enhancing service programs and capacity building for agencies serving seniors.
Illinois' 3-year budget impasse was particularly hard on the state's public universities. Chicago's cash-strapped Northeastern Illinois University faced furloughs and hundreds of layoffs. The mainly minority commuter campus now has a new president, its first African-American woman. Joining us is Northeastern Illinois University's new president, Gloria Gibson. President Gibson, welcome to Chicago Tonight. I understand you've been on the job for just 3 months.
Yes.
How's it going?
It's going great. I am so happy to be back in my home state of Illinois. I grew up in downstate Illinois, in East St. Louis, and really wanted to get back to the Midwest. My previous position was at Morgan State University in Baltimore. So it's been going great. I've met a lot of people, wonderful faculty, staff, and students at Northeastern, and just really happy to be at the institution.
Well, Northeastern has been particularly hard hit by the state's financial crisis. Almost a fifth of the university's budget relies on money from Springfield. 180 employees had to be let go last year. How is the university doing? How is the university's financial infrastructural health?
Well, fortunately, I arrived in June, and shortly after I arrived, the state approved the budget for this year, and within a few days, the governor signed that budget. So first and foremost, I am very appreciative that we have a budget for this year. You are absolutely correct. After going through a budget impasse for 2 years, layoffs, furloughs, it did impact the institution. We have, readjusted our budgets. We are looking for new sources of revenue. We are hopeful that we will get a budget for the upcoming year. And there is a level of optimism as we move forward.
We were just looking at video of the student body. There's a lot of diversity there. How would you describe the students that attend Northeastern?
We have excellent students, and we have the most diverse student body in the Midwest. And it's one of the things that I love about the institution. Of course, we are a Hispanic serving institution, but we also have African American students, about 7–8%. We have Asian American students. We have a very diverse student body in regards to generations. We have adult learners. And so it is a very diverse student body.
I noticed there were several shots of students indicated that they were Muslim. Is there a fairly, how big is the Muslim population, student population?
We have a large Muslim community, of course, in Chicago, and many of those students attend Northeastern as well.
Enrollment declined about 17% between 2013 and last fall. What's going on?
Yeah, well, a number of things. Certainly the budget impasse, it did impact Northeastern, as it did many institutions in Illinois. We know that many students, in fact, left the state of Illinois to go to universities in surrounding states. So there is a call by university presidents in Illinois for students to seriously consider staying here in the state of Illinois. We have excellent universities, we have excellent programs here, and so first and foremost we want students to recognize the state of Illinois, the universities here, and for myself, of course, that I want you to recognize, students to recognize the excellent opportunities that we provide at Northeastern Illinois University.
As I mentioned, you've been here 3 months, so what are your short-term goals, say in the next 6 months to a year? What do you want to do?
It's been meet and greet, and it's been very exciting. It's sort of been a whirlwind. I've met community members, both community members that are in and surrounding the university. I've met community members in the Puerto Rican community, in the Latino community, of course the African American community. So first and foremost, it's getting out and about. I've talked with legislators. I had a meeting with the mayor. I had a meeting with the chancellor of the community colleges. And so all of that contributes to my knowledge about the state and about Chicago in particular. Secondly, we're about moving forward. With
in what ways? For example, where do you want to take the university, maybe, that it hasn't been in the past?
Well, first and foremost, access to education. is one of my primary goals. It is important to provide that opportunity for students to come to Northeastern and to get an excellent education. But it's not just about access, it's not just about bringing students to the campus, but making sure that they are successful once they come to our campus. So I always say it's access and success. And so many initiatives we will be putting in place to recruit additional students to Northeastern, but also services in place so that students can be successful.
President Gloria Gibson, thank you so much for joining us on Chicago Tonight. Welcome to Chicago, and all the best to you. You are our neighbors, and so we're particularly glad to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
Earlier this year, Forbes magazine named Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood one of the 12 coolest neighborhoods in the world. To many longtime residents of that rapidly gentrifying community, that was actually bad news, likely to bring even more development and potential displacement. One lifelong Pilsen resident is trying to have an impact on the changes he sees through photography. Jay Shefsky introduced us to Sebastián Hidalgo this summer, and here is another look.
My name is Sebastián Hidalgo. I am a visual journalist based out of Chicago. I grew up here in Pilsen.
Sebastián Hidalgo always carries his camera. Because he says he never knows what Pilsen will show him.
I was walking home. I came across this family that was playing in a fire hydrant, just like I was when I was younger. And this little girl, in the corner of my eye, I just saw her just floating in this nice little stream of fire hydrant water. And it's great, like those memories they're really special.
Pilsen holds a lot of memories for Hidalgo.
There was a sense of community, a sense of family, where you walk in those stores and the clerk was like, "Oh, you're the Hidalgo boy, how's your mom?" That's essentially gone.
For the last 3 years, Sebastián Hidalgo has photographed what he calls a culture under threat. Gentrification has changed Pilsen a lot in his lifetime. With a fellowship from City Bureau, a nonprofit that supports community journalism, his project is called The Quietest Form of Displacement in a Changing Barrio. Quiet, he says, because the impact is not just economic and not always visible.
I'm trying to bring awareness that with gentrification, there's also indirect displacement, which is the feeling of a home changing and being unrecognizable to the people who've called it home for generations.
Sebastián Hidalgo discovered photography when he was 12. He was in Mexico to visit his dying grandfather, and his uncle loaned him a camera.
He handed me the camera with essentially my first assignment, which was to document my family's mourning process. Watching my grandfather die, watching my family mourn and how it changed them, I just found meaning in it.
At 22, Hidalgo's Pilsen project was featured in the New York Times. Now, as a 23-year-old freelancer, he mostly documents life in Chicago's working class and low-income Black and Latino communities. And he doesn't claim to be objective.
It's really hard for me to essentially be neutral to things when ultimately the only way that I know how to create a photograph is to care. I care deeply about the people that I photograph.
Sebastián Hidalgo knows that Pilsen will never go back to being the neighborhood he remembers. But he says he hopes his photos can help the newcomers and the developers see his Pilsen and the people who were there first.
consider them when you see them walking down the street. Consider them when you open up a new business here in the neighborhood. They've been here. They deserve a place where they can actually call home. Where they can work and provide for their families. Ultimately, that's what I want for Pilsen.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Jay Shefsky.
Sebastián Hidalgo is one of the artists featured in an exhibit through February 3rd at the National Museum of Mexican Art in Pilsen. And you can see a slideshow of his work on our website. And that is our show for this Thursday night. Stay connected by signing up for our daily briefing and join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review. We leave you tonight with a glimpse of Art Expo Chicago, which opens today through September 30th at Navy Pier, billed as Chicago's signature art fair, showcasing 135 exhibits and featuring international artists from across the country and around the world. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Phil Ponce, and I thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.